And so all God says to Moses is to tell the people to keep it moving and use what you got. If you use what I gave you, you will find that it is more than what you thought. You thought I gave you this stick so when you got tired, you could lean on it. But there are tricks in your stick. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise, surprise. I disguise my power in ordinary things so that in the time of trouble, the enemy won't even know what hit him. But if you stretch for what you touch your neighbor and say, I got something. I know it don't look like much, but I got something. I know it don't look dangerous, but I got something. If you won't count up your chariots, at least let me brag about my stick. I got something that God gave me that will outlast all your... Slap your neighbor and say, there's tricks in your stick. Don't give it up. Don't throw it away. Don't cast it aside. Don't... Can't tell if I'm on. I can't tell if I'm off. Okay. I guess I'm broken. What the? Yeah, testing. Oh wow. Is that what that is? Oh, okay. Alright. Am I? Okay. Wait. So, oh, wow. Now I'm real confused. Okay. That's there. This is here. I'll just let this play while I'm trying to figure this out. Thank you all for joining the Blackdom Renaissance podcast. Testing, going live soon. As soon as these technical things get solved.
Blackdom. The significance of the Afro frontier in American history, 1900 to 1930. Timothy Eugene Nelson. Preface. Blackdom was a real place. I have to make this fact clear, because my brother Maison Nelson thought I made it up. No lie. Maison, pronounced Maison, recorded my doctoral graduation. He flew all the way from the Air Force Base, where he was stationed in Las Vegas, Nevada, to El Paso, Texas. He took pictures with me holding my University of Texas at El Paso mock diploma. Still, after not seeing him for about 5 years, his question was, when you gone make some money? I graduated with a PhD in Borderland history on December 10th, 2015, with subfield expertise in African diasporic studies and U.S. history. In 2019, I accepted a seat on a panel at the National Conference for the Western History Association in Las Vegas, Nevada, at the Westgate Vegas Resort and Casino, near the Vegas Strip. Dr. Kenneth Hamilton was on the panel, and I could not pass up the chance to meet him in person.
I have no idea if I'm live.
Unknown to Dr. Hamilton, he had become an intellectual father to the Blackdom thesis, and all-around icon for me. Maison drove from his house on the north side of Vegas.
So, my brother thought I made it up. And
Blackdom.
Hold on.
The significance of the...
Oh, okay. My brother thought I made it up. So, I have to begin with that because it's difficult for people to understand what an Afro frontier is. Black people weren't meant or associated with the West. But the Afro frontier puts them smack dab in the middle. That's scary to a lot of people. Changes the trajectory of history. Okay, let me see. I have no idea. Let me see. Like, how do you practice if you can't tell what is streaming? Okay, I'm gonna let the significance of the Afro frontier.
Blackdom in the Borderlands. Significance of the Afro Frontier, 1903 to 1929. By Dr. Timothy E. Nelson, historian and artist.
My bad.
El Palacio 37. Editor's preface: with widespread reporting on racial disparity in the United States in 2020 has come a renewed interest in a New Mexico site not often discussed, Blackdom, an all-black settlement in the southeastern corner of the state, founded in 1903 and occupied until the 1920s. Historically, conversations about black people project the intentions of others and obscure deep analysis of black folks. As a society in the post-Obama era, we must ask new questions about black people and reframe histories we thought we knew. The summer of 2020 resembled the summer of 1919, a time referred to as Red Summer. A pandemic was raging, Russia was in the news, and violence against black bodies was both state-sponsored and vigilante-inspired. One might argue that history repeated itself. As the state of New Mexico enters its second century and grapples with the histories that came before, this essay about Blackdom, New Mexico, provides a model, as modern historians do not subscribe to the idea of history repeating itself. We must instead focus on relearning and reimagining our preconceived notions of success, failure, and equality. The most common narrative about Blackdom is that its original homesteaders established their own municipality in order to escape the oppression of American white supremacy, but found farming in the arid and acrid Permian Basin challenging, and soon abandoned their efforts. Recently published scholarship by historian Dr. Timothy E. Nelson, however, suggests black people intentionally used the legal and social system of separate but equal to their advantage. Travel, then, to what Dr. Nelson refers to as the Afro Frontier, immerse in a new history of the prairie. Rather than a story of ultimate failure, you will read a story featuring the ingenuity of a community that made use of a corporate veil to achieve sovereignty in the chaos of the borderlands at the turn of the 20th century. What appears today to be a physical ghost town is, in fact, a testa. Meant to black ingenuity in the face of immense hardship, rather than a story of agricultural failure, Blackdom is a story of multi-generational economic success. Charlotte Josinski.
Dr. Timothy E. Nelson, historian and artist. Introduction. In the early 1900s, the North American continental interior hosted two different centuries-long global colonization schemes. The Pecos Valley region's economic surge brought exploitation of people and land as it underwent the largest infrastructure projects in the world at the time. African descendants under the conditions of American blackness, black people, sought opportunity in the colonization collision at Mexico's northern frontier and the U.S. western frontier. Through the homestead process in the southeastern section of the New Mexico Territory, black people became colonizers. After the discovery of oil in New Mexico, they fully participated in the bonanza and received royalties that extended through the post-World War II era. In this essay, we explore an intersection of African descendants in diaspora, who quarantined themselves to achieve the goals of their ancestral strivings. Blackdom was an Afrocentric microcosm of hegemonic society and colonization efforts that spanned over 4 centuries. The first major global colonization scheme launched from the European continent, and Africans from the western and northern parts of their homeland sought employment through military service. African soldiers helped seize what became Mexico on the North American continent. In the late 1400s, during the exploitation of indigenous peoples and their lands, some Africans benefited from the spoils of war to include landlordship. The second major colonization effort began in the late 1500s, when a new set of European colonizers lurched westward into indigenous spaces. Opportunistically, some African descendants chose military service to aid in colonization efforts. In the 1800s, the two sets of colonizers converged. Amidst the chaos, in all-black military units, Buffalo soldiers engaged a Spanish-speaking borderland as an occupying force and border patrol. By 1900, African descendants in the U.S. Mexico borderlands carved out spaces and fully developed an Afro-frontier. Significant in the trajectory of African descendant peoples in diaspora, Blackdom embodied a declaration of sovereignty, separate but equal. In September of 1903, 13 black men signed the Blackdom Townsite Company's Articles of Incorporation and erected a corporate veil that allowed them to quarantine from white supremacy. Partitioning themselves at the contested intersection of the U.S. Mexico borderlands, black people who were diverse in age, character, and capacity, unified to consciously engage in Afrotopia. New Mexico was on the verge of statehood, and an incorporated all-black town had the potential to produce generational wealth. Blackdom's grand opening in May of 1904 fell short of expectations, and the prospect for a town languished until the 1909 Homestead Enlargement Act. On the eve of New Mexico's 1912 incorporation as a state of the Union, Blackdom was fully revived and functioned as a thriving unincorporated town. Particularly after statehood, Blackdomites found opportunity behind the corporate veil of their municipality. In 1919, newly discovered documents surfaced that revealed Blackdom's third decade, during the Roaring Twenties, with the advent of Blackdom Oil Company. In May of 1920, Frank Marion Boyer and his wife Ella Magruder Boyer filed the official plat for the town of Blackdom, which documented the surveyed location and details about the terrain. In the state of New Mexico, on Mescalero Apache Reservation land in Chavez County, Blackdomites mapped a township of blocks, streets, and alleys in a grid pattern, with a town square in the center. Once officially incorporated, the county, state, and federal authorities were able to assess property values and taxes. Agricultural, indigenous, Spanish, white understanding of New Mexico precludes the public acknowledgement of black folks' striving. For example, Blackdomites were at the vanguard of regional oil market forces without the impositions of a white-dominated society. Yet, few people in New Mexico have been exposed to this history. On biblically dry desert prairies, black people realized their Afrotopic ambitions because they incorporated and made their living a business. The Blackdom Townsite Company was an economic vehicle to drive Blackdomite success in the creation of generational wealth. When the Blackdom experiment began in the territory of New Mexico, federal laws and jurisdictions superseded any laws or local ordinances and made Jim Crow laws in the territory hard to enforce. Until statehood, Blackdomites had no higher authority than God. The territory Jim Crow law loophole afforded black people full authority to realize their dreams. The incorporation of the Blackdom Townsite after statehood was for the protection of their sovereignty on promised government land. The Lost Years, 1903–1909. Eubank, Crutcher Homestead completed June 3, 1912 at Township 13S Range 2040 Aliquots SE 1/4 Sections 34 in Chavez County. Blackdom's early years were lost to the struggle. Over time, Blackdomites mitigated the initial hardships of homesteading by providing apprenticeship programs and host families to new immigrants. As newcomers, Blackdomites indulged in their duality as thinkers and doers, brought together their experiences of religious teachings, military service, and Prince Hall Freemasonry that amalgamated into an intentional intersectional blackness. As Blackdomite homesteaders, They forged bonds working on their own land, in church, and Masonic lodges, as all of them were required to submit to divine laws of sowing and reaping. During Blackdom's lost years, the idea of building a town in the Pecos River Valley was far-fetched and akin to believing in miracles. Born and raised in the South under the major institutions of slavery, Crutcher Eubank witnessed its demise after the U.S. Civil War, 1861 to 1865. 1861 to 1865. As a young man, Crutcher also watched the rise of white supremacy and suffered the conditions of American blackness. Moreover, in 1896, the Supreme Court decided that black people were legally allowed to be separate. In his adult life, Crutcher saw the end of American Reconstruction, and yet, he and his family decided to migrate into the frontier, where there was more insecurity and civil mayhem. The Eubank family witnessed chaos throughout the 19th century and chose Afrotopia at the turn of the 20th century. In 1905, during America's racial nadir, Crutcher and the Eubank family migrated to the New Mexico Territory from Kentucky. Crutcher, patriarch, began the family homestead patent on October 9, 1906. He became the pastor of Blackdom's first church. Pastor Eubank not only preached about faith, he chose to homestead on New Mexico desert prairies. By faith, he started planting kaffir corn in the winter, a warm weather plant. This corn variety had slow early growth and wasn't ideal to plant in a cold winter ground. Crutcher quickly learned that if planted too early, late replanting was needed, which made his leap of faith inefficient. Even worse, if a sufficient stand was secured in the first planting, the growth of the young plants would grow slowly, weeds aggressively grew, and more cultivation was needed. The Eubank family was faithful, consistent and hard-working, but they sowed seeds in the right place at the wrong time and reaped little harvest for the amount of toil. Water was hard to access and planting mishaps could prove financially ruinous. In a completely new climate than they were used to, they were forced to pivot and transition into their new agricultural cycles. Specifically, they needed to adjust to the biblical drought conditions. They adjusted by learning the vagaries and irrigating desert land to subsist. In their promised land, the Eubank family was on a steep learning curve. Crutcher, as head of the family, found side hustles to fund the homestead. Typically in Blackdomite society, he often had to leave his family on the unimproved homestead to raise capital working as a laborer in nearby cities. Settling in Chavez County, Crutcher and his family were hosted by the Boyer family when they first arrived. Frank Boyer was a minister, ex-Buffalo soldier, a Freemason, and the first Blackdom Townsite Company president. Crutcher was a minister and part of a religiously inspired homestead class. The Eubank family endured with the help of the Boyers, who oriented them to the divine laws of the region and homestead process. According to Crutcher's homestead proof, he built a modest home with a porch worth about $250, $7,000, today. Crutcher leveraged most of his